Alright everybody, let's get another video lesson going. We're getting into period 3 or period 4, or unit 4 of our topics. And we're going to start today with Jefferson and judicial review. So let's get into it. Objective, we're going to talk about the causes and the effects of policy in the early republic and debates and what's going on. Alright, so some key terms for you. As far as big brain questions, just identify some long-term effects of judicial review. And we'll talk about judicial review in a bit, and all that'll make sense. So, let's get right into it now. Again, brief reminder, quick recap. The revolution or election of 1800 is so important because it is a peaceful transition of power from the Federalist Party of John Adams, who loses, to the Democratic Republican Party of Thomas Jefferson. This is a big, crucial, super important deal. And it's because of that he's able to win. So it's something to keep in mind. And it is probably the most important thing that Adams does, maybe. Right? You could argue it was keeping us out of war with France, but I think that peaceful transition going so smoothly and so well is super important because it carries over all the way to today. So, with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. Key point 1, the election of 1800 showed that power passed peacefully from one party to another in America, right? This is the way it was going to be. It's another precedent. Federalists changed to Thomas Jefferson. We already talked about that, so if you need time to write it, go ahead and pause there so we can move on. A bit about Jefferson as a president. He served from 1801 to 1809. He was a Democratic Republican. He was a Southern planter and slave owner. We all know this. That term statesman, basically what it means is he was a professional politician. He's one of the first professional politicians. He served in assemblies. He wrote the Declaration. He was a governor. He was a minister to France, Secretary of State. He served as vice president. He will be the president as well. He's a founding Democratic Republican, and he's a Renaissance man. And what does that mean? Well, he considered himself like an educated philosopher, patron of the arts, a scientist, like all these things he partook in here and there. So you don't need this whole slide. But like wrap up what he is as a president, right? So Thomas Jefferson, these are the years. He's a Southern planter and slave owner. He is a professional politician, a founding Democratic Republican, and he was a elite. He was a noble person. Like, if this was Europe, he'd be a noble. He was into all of these fancy, like, elite items. So just keep that in mind. He's a very wealthy person, and he lived like that. So if you need that slide again, pause so we can move forward. Now, Jeffersonianism or Jeffersonian democracy. What does that mean? Well, it's basically the name for how Jefferson ran the country. Jefferson wanted to lessen the power of the central government, like as much as possible. He hates strong government. He's a Democratic Republican to his core. All right, so he wants weak government, and he also believes in a laissez-faire economy, and this is important because it's going to come back a little later. A laissez-faire economy means that the government was hands-off in terms of how it dealt with the economy. Laissez-faire is a general term that means hands-off. So you could be a laissez-faire economy, means there's no involvement in the government, right? No government involvement. You could be a laissez-faire student who has their hands off and doesn't really do anything, isn't involved in class. I could be a hands-off teacher who doesn't really teach, right? I could point you to crash course videos all day and that'll be the end of that. That is not what teaching is. That is not what being a responsible student is. But the moreover point is that laissez-faire applies to more than just the economy. Laissez-faire economy means that it is no government involvement in the economy. Speaking of economies, we're going to talk about Jefferson. So if you need time on the slide, go ahead and pause so we can move on. To Jefferson's economy. Again, limited government control in that economy. A system will develop that is called free enterprise. And in a free enterprise system, the goods are exchanged, goods and services, with as little government involvement as possible, right? As little as possible, just enough to make it run, and then it operates all on its own. Under free enterprise, buyers and sellers can set their own prices. They can sell and buy at what they want for as much as they want or as little as they want. Now, under other systems like, say, mercantilism, right, which was a system with heavy government involvement, the governments typically set the prices. So an example I gave in class was like if the paleta man outside of the school, y'all remember him? I know it's been a long time, but like if he sells for whatever he wants, right? Now, if one day the principal were to go outside and dictate, hey, you have to sell for these prices, he's no longer operating under a free enterprise system, whereas before, when he did what he wanted or sold for the prices he wanted, he was. So free enterprise is an economic system where the government is not involved and goods and services exchange among the people. The people are in charge of what they sell for and what they buy for. So keep that in mind. We need time on here. Move on. We're going to talk about foreign policy. So, Jefferson is still drowning under the foreign policy issue, just like every president before him, Washington and Adams. His answer is, hey, let's just, if trading with Europe is making all of our ships get attacked, let's just stop trading with Europe. So an embargo, this is a general term, is a stop on foreign trade, usually on a specific type. Well, Jefferson passes something called the Embargo Act, which stops American trade with every foreign nation, every single one of them. And he thinks that America will be okay, that they're farming and all that, so this agricultural society that he dreams of, that everything will be okay, that he'll be all right. What ends up happening is he crashes the United States economy. All right, so he's going to crash the economy with the Embargo Act, which is going to fail. Congress will replace it with another one called the Non-Intercourse Act, but that's also going to fail. So if you need time on the slide, go ahead and pause. We're going to move on. The order that these go in is the Embargo Act happens. It hurts America's trade and economy. The Embargo Act fails, and then the Non-Intercourse Act will be passed. It's also going to fail. So if you need to get the sequence in order, and then we're going to show you what the the Non-Intercourse Act is. So this is a modified version of the Embargo Act that only bans trade with England and France. And that might seem good on paper, right? Because England and France are the ones attacking our ships. But that doesn't really work because England and France are the primary purchasers of American goods. And America doesn't make a lot of goods right now. They simply find them. It's a lot of natural resources. And so a good way to look at this is the markets that they're able to sell to, they being the United States, is so limited that this doesn't help at all and still keeps hurting almost the same. It would be like if I gave you $100 to go buy groceries and I told you could only shop at AutoZone. Sure, that's a lot of money for groceries. But how many groceries are you going to find at AutoZone? Like, how many groceries could you possibly get? Not very many, if at all. Right? You're going to come back home with a bunch of Snickers bars and soda bottles. And it might sound good, those aren't groceries. It's not being able to trade with England and France, like you might as well not trade at all. So this act doesn't help, and it fails as well. Doesn't help at all. So those are Jefferson's kind of big policies. If you need time on those, go ahead and pause. We're going to move on and start talking about Chief Justice John Marshall and the Marshall Court. So, John Marshall, when you hear John Marshall's name, think federal power. He's one of the last, I always call him the last Federalist standing, because he is one of the last Federalists in power well after the Federalists are gone. All right, and the Marshall Court was the Supreme Court set of judges that he was, the Chief Justice of. They are responsible for expanding the power of the judiciary branch and the Supreme Court very early on in the New Republic. So if you need time on that, keep on going and get there, because we're going to move on. So, Supreme Court justices serve lifelong terms, you know this. John Marshall is the first Chief Justice, and he is a big fan of strong central government. Throughout his time, you will hear his name as he tries to ensure the strength of federal governments over the states over time, much to the frustration of guys like Jefferson, who do not like when the federal is too powerful. But there's not much he's going to be able to do about it, and we're going to get into why really, really soon. So, let's move on. The Midnight Judges. So, this was an event that John Adams did in 1800. After he loses and he knows he's lost, he really quickly writes up and tries to appoint judges to be hired, right? And this is called the Midnight Judges because it's literally the last minute, 11:59 before he has to leave. He's there writing the papers out and he gets them done. And it's an attempt to maintain Federalist power. He wants the Federalists to be able to have power over the Democratic Republicans. Like, not too much because he knows he's going to have to give it up, but he wants them to have a good standing and wants the Federalists to keep going. And this is through this act that he signs through this Midnight Judges is called the Judiciary Act of 1801. And it increases the number of federal judges with lifelong appointments. So he basically just makes a whole bunch of new federal judges and gives them all to Federalists. So this was the last-ditch effort of John Adams to maintain some Federalist power. Now, what that leads to is a big Supreme Court case known as Marbury versus Madison. After Jefferson takes the job, several of these Federalists that are supposed to have federal jobs do not get them, including Marbury. And the case he sues the federal government and Jefferson, and it goes to the Supreme Court. And the court ruled that Jefferson and Madison were making actions that were illegal and unconstitutional. The court rules like, hey, those jobs are theirs, you can't not give them to them. The court doing this gives themselves the power to review and decide on a law's constitutionality, and this is called judicial review. So, judicial review is when the Supreme Court decides if a law follows the rules of the Constitution and is a constitutional law, or doesn't and is an unconstitutional law. The Supreme Court gives itself that power through the court case of Marbury versus Madison. So Marbury versus Madison leads directly to judicial review. And now we're going to talk about judicial review on the next few slides. So if you need this, pause and move on. So, Supreme Court gave itself the power of judicial review in order to check the legislative and executive and judge the constitutionality of federal laws. We already said that, but there it is again in the key point. So it's the power to declare a law unconstitutional. This power gives the judiciary branch much more authority. Before this power was given, the judiciary is just kind of there. They're just kind of doing what courts do. Now they have authority to check the other branches. The power to declare laws unconstitutional or constitutional. So if you need this, pause it, and I'm going to take the last slide is just what this means. And it's important that you know it. Everybody always forgets it. Don't forget it. Use the terms. And the terms are constitutional and unconstitutional. If something is unconstitutional, it goes against the Constitution. It is illegal. It is void. You can't do it. It breaks the rules, right? The Constitution is the rule book for the government. It is up to the court to decide what the Constitution means to interpret it, right? That's what they're doing. And if they decide a law is constitutional, it follows the rules in the rule book, it can become a law. If they decide the laws are unconstitutional, then it breaks the rules of the rule book. It can no longer be a law and it must be void. It must be canceled. So that's it for that. That's it for the Supreme Court. Make sure if you're watching this later, you have the exit ticket done on Google Classroom. That is it for me. If you need anything, you know how to reach me, guys. Have a great rest of your day. See y'all in class at some point.